Welcome to our Dream to Rise podcast. This is Cynthia Concordia, your host.
Welcome to our Dream to Rise podcast. And I'm so grateful and honored to have our guest speaker. Her name is Jacquie Michelle Grillon, and she is actually an accomplished speaker, teacher, and counselor. Her need to excavate her own pain took her on a journey from pain to peace. She is an expert in emotional trauma and abuse with over 20 years speaking and teaching experience. And without further ado, I'm so excited. We had a chat before this, before we start with this episode. Um, I'm kind of excited to listen and hear her story because she had gone through the same challenges which I have gone through. So without further ado, let us welcome our guest speaker, Jacquie Michelle Grillon. Welcome, Jacquie.
Thank you. Thank you. It's an honor to be here. Thanks for asking. And I am, like I said, honored to be here.
Same here. And I know that this episode will bring so much enlightenment and insights to our listeners because I know there are still a lot of people there outside listening that they feel that they don't have any voice. But I know there is a way for us to let go of the past and move forward. So I would just like to ask you, as what I have requested, I would like you to share your story, and then uh, how were you able to overcome that adversity, those traumas, those adversities in life, and how were you able to let go of the past and now living the life you love, helping others?
Yeah, so that's a very, very long story that we definitely do not have time for. But
Anyway,
I can give you,
we have a 30-minute session, right? It's
you got it.
episode. Yeah, okay.
Okay, so the easy version is I really resonated with what you just said, that there's many people out there that don't have a voice, and that's how I grew up. I thought I grew up in a normal household, but I didn't. I thought that I was doing what I was supposed to be doing, moving on, from my life and going and getting a job and having a child and all of those things. And I really thought that it was just, me being me. I had no idea that there was so many things working in the background, that my default system in my body and in my soul and in my brain didn't work like other people. So from a very young age, I grew up in the era, I know it's, different times now, and I really love that parents today, even my own sons parenting style is about having their children express their feelings. But that's not how it was when I was growing up. It was more like, I'll give you something to be angry about. I'll give you something to cry about. So your feelings were shut down from a very young age. Or things like, I would hear from one of my parents, I never said that. So there was gaslighting at a very young age. And I think it's dangerous that you make a child question their own sanity, and shutting down their feelings isn't going to be make for a productive adult human later that can regulate their emotions and be productive, because they're constantly questioning themselves and seeking outside validation and all of those things that happen when you come from that kind of background. And so normal was anything but normal, and I certainly did not have a voice. If anything, I would check in with you or anybody outside of me. It was more like, please just, tell me that I'm doing okay. Tell me I'm doing a good job, because
Mhm.
I had no idea that whether I was or not. Even if I thought I was, I couldn't trust myself because of earlier conditioning that that was never said or that never happened. So when you're constantly questioning yourself, you're always seeking that outside. So there was a lot of people pleasing. And when you're people pleasing, you don't have a voice. You're basically doing what other people need you to do so they stay in your life. It worked both ways, right? Because they got something out of it. Like the people I attracted were takers, right? They weren't givers. I wasn't in reciprocal relationships. They were, that's what they signed up for. And I signed up because I needed to do something for them because it made me feel good about myself. It was the only way that I knew how to get self-esteem because nobody ever taught me how to get self-esteem for myself. So to me, if I did something for you, if I cooked something for you, if I did a favor for you, like it would be like, oh, look at me. I'm a good person. It made me feel validated. It was my false sense of self-esteem. So that's why it worked for so long, but I didn't have a voice because while I was people pleasing, I had to be who you needed me to be. If I showed who I was, people would go away. And that's what would happen in relationships. I would have relationships with men and you're people pleasing and people pleasing. And then, what happens when you get into a relationship after a while, you finally feel like, okay, they're not going anywhere. So you can relax. You don't have to do as much for them. You don't have to work so hard to get them to love you because now they love you and they're not going anywhere. But then that's when you would get things like, or I got things like, you changed. You're not the same person. And then I would work even harder. I would double down and work harder to get them to love me again. And then 6 months later, it would be, you changed. You're not the same person. And what I realized later, after going through therapy and sobriety and all the things where I needed to heal and recover for myself and learn to start choosing myself, that's when I learned, you know, they were right because I never let them see who I was because I didn't even know who I was because I was so busy getting them, whoever them is outside of me to love me, whether it's a boss to like my work or a guy to like, or a friend or whatever. I needed you to be okay with me. So I was never myself. And when I finally had to stop and figure out who I was, that's when I realized I didn't have a voice. I thought I had a voice that whole time. I thought I was in reciprocal relationships with people and I thought I was being myself. But it wasn't until I stopped all of that, when all of that stopped working, that I realized that I didn't have an identity. I was being who they thought I thought that they wanted me to be, and they never asked me to. It was just my need to be heard, my need to be loved, my needs getting met in a weird, twisted kind of, sick kind of way. But it worked for me because it gave me false self-esteem. Of course, later I learned that that is not self-esteem at all. You do self-esteemable acts to get self-esteem. And that's where I watch my grandson who's 3 years old and he's like, I did it. I did it. Whatever it is, he does a task and he achieves it. And he's like, I did it. That's real self-esteem. I didn't
Exactly.
know that. I thought I had to do. That's how we were raised. You had to do. The family I came from, it wasn't unconditional love. It was more like, you were loved based on what you did. Like, can you watch my child for me? Oh, no. Oh, then you're terrible. Oh, yes. Oh, I love you so much. Like, that's kind of where I came from. So when you have no
And you
voice,
know what? I'm sorry.
yeah.
When you mentioned about it, the family really uh is a big factor on how we are on what and how we have become as an adult, right? I was
Yeah.
also raised in such a way that there was no showing of appreciation. And
Oh, no.
when I asked, because I used to be with the World Bank, right? We had this pilot study about showing appreciation. When I asked my children, did I show appreciation? Immediately, they told me, Mom, no. It was a slap on my face. And it took me some time to reflect on that. And then I told them, I'm sorry because I was raised like that. They never
Yes.
appreciated my effort, but they focus on the negative, saying,
Always.
"Oh, yes, and oh, you didn't. You didn't. When I give them like a 95 score,
Yeah.
why not give us 100? If I
Right.
give them 100, oh, why didn't you do the additional bonus question so you'll have 105?" So there's no satisfaction from their side
Yeah.
from that you did something very well. And you know, during our time, I'm older than you. During my time, I, as what you've mentioned, we could not express ourselves. And the moment that they look at you, there's this eye communication saying, stop it. And then
Yep.
you know where you are, so just follow what I want you to do. So that was the thing that took me or brought me to the situation wherein I just, as what you mentioned, people pleasing. So when I got into a relationship, later on I got abused because I I was very submissive. It's just
Right.
I'm sorry, I'm just sharing because we
No,
have something that in common.
exactly. Yes, of
Uh-huh.
course. And to me, when you come from abuse, whether it's emotional, sexual, mental, any kind of abuse, right? It doesn't need to always be physical. Um, you're going to attract that because you absorb that, right? I absorbed all of that from my parents. Let's face it, everybody on the planet comes from some kind of dysfunctional family. There's no such thing as a functional family. So if we have hundreds and hundreds or thousands of years of unhealed trauma being passed down in our DNA, and I'm the first person to heal, let's face it, the rest of the family's not going to be okay with any of that. It's going to shake the leaves on the tree a little bit. But I'm happy
Yes.
to shake the tree. When you get your
Yes.
voice back, you're not going to let anybody shut it down anymore. When you realize who you are and you get a solid sense of self, you're not going to let anybody define it anymore. And sometimes you go to the other end of the extreme because you're like, no, I'm not doing it anymore. And then you kind of have to soften it up and come back to the middle. But sometimes you have to go all the way because you were never able to say no. So sometimes the no has to be a hard no and then following through on the no, because let's face it, when you come from those kind of relationships, when you're the people pleaser, the people on the other end know that if they just ask you enough times, that your no will become a yes. So saying no is not even enough. You have to follow through on the no, because if they know you're going to cave, they'll keep coming. And once they
Yeah.
realize that your no means no and your yes means yes, believe me, they're going to start treating you differently. And sometimes they leave. And I had my heart broken a million times over, but I also set those relationships up on purpose to give me false self-esteem. But it still broke my heart when they left, because I'm like, what's wrong with me? But the fact is it was never a healthy relation. It was never a reciprocal give and take relationship to begin with. We were both getting our needs met, not in the best possible way, but they were taking and I was giving, and I needed to give and they needed to take. And when you
Yes.
ask for a reciprocal relationship from the other side and they're just takers and they're not able to give, they're never going to be able to meet your needs. So you're going to have to get those needs met someplace else. And that is heartbreaking when the reality sets in, when the bubble breaks and you realize all of that. But that's also freeing, because that's when you start getting your voice back. That's when you
Mhm.
start saying, I'm not going to be in relationships with people, whether it's business or personal or romantic, unless they're reciprocal, because I'm worth more than that today. And I didn't
Mhm.
believe that at that time.
I agree. When you mention about the problem of saying no, that's usually the problem. Even at work, I had that problem, but we have to learn to set our boundaries. I know um, it's hard in terms of family relationships, no? When you say no, I'm sure you will receive negative feedback from them. It is
You're
hard.
selfish. What's wrong with you? Why can't
Yes.
you do this one thing for me?
Uh-huh. So how were you able to handle that with your family members?
I still get that from time to time,
Uh-huh.
like if I don't want to go to an event. I used to go to all the events for my family, right? And because I felt obligated to. But when I really started asking myself, do I want to go to these events? And let's face it, there's a lot of family events I'm sure most of your viewers can relate to that we don't want to go to.
Mhm.
But that doesn't mean some of them we probably should go to. So that's where you have to figure out for yourself. And I had to figure that out for myself. So it wasn't that I wasn't going to any of them. I just decided that I was going to go to the ones that I really wanted to go to, whether it was Christmas or Thanksgiving or whatever. But if I went to that occasion in my head before while I was considering whether to go or not. And I went to that party or event and I had the worst time. And I knew that it was just going to end in fighting and, not so
The
nice
dramas.
behavior. Then yes, I'm trying to be kind here, but yes, exactly. Then it's not worth my mental health to put myself in those positions today, right? At some point, you don't want to put yourself in positions to be hurt anymore. It's bad enough life is already doing that to us. I don't need to do that when it's something I have a choice about. So there's some family obligations that are obligatory, right? But there's
Mhm.
others where you can choose. And there's been plenty of holidays where I didn't go. And the answer I always receive from my sisters anyway would be, you're selfish. We have to go and you
Uh-huh.
don't have to go. And I would tell them, no, that's not true. You don't have to go either. But then the way that they would phrase it is how I felt for years, is like, well, if you don't go, then who's going to go? And then what's going to happen? And then it's never going to happen. And you know what? If it didn't happen, it didn't happen. But you know what? Maybe we would all be happy on those holidays, because we were never happy on those holidays when we got together. So maybe one of us can have a happy holiday and you're going to call me selfish doing it. That's okay. And it's really hard because I think that's the hardest part about choosing yourself is the guilt, because no matter
Yeah.
how much I know it's good for me and I know that I have to choose it regardless of whatever the judgments are on the other side, and those judgments are coming, right? You still have to choose yourself, and the guilt never stops. Whether somebody in the family or somebody in, wherever in your life are guilting you about it. But I think the family guilt is the hardest, because I already feel guilty for not going, because I feel like I should. That's that conditioning. I should. It's my family. I should want to do this. Why don't I want to do this? But my soul is like, no, that's not going to be a good move. And so you have to do it, but it doesn't make it hurt any less when you get the judgment, and it doesn't make the guilt lessen any less, but I still have to do it. And the more times you do it, the more empowered you get, the more you realize you have to keep doing it. And you have to, and this is the example, right? When they say, walk your walk or be an example of your life, this is how you are an example in your life. It may not be an example to, some of my family, how they want me to be, or
Yes.
even my friends, how they want me to be when I tell them no. But it's an example that other people, it's evidence when other people are telling me, like, I could never say what you said. You
Mhm.
said everything I wanted. I was thinking, but I couldn't say out loud. So it does make you feel like you're helping other people who don't have a voice to either get one or know that it's possible. You can be somebody else's hope by just living and breathing your example. As long as you feel okay with your decision, then I say go for it.
And another thing, we are not the type of person who would just no in a very disrespectful way.
No, it would be very considered and thought out and
Yes.
methodical, and it would have been a very hard decision to even come to the no.
Yes, exactly. And it's a nice thing because we become the models of our children. And
Exactly.
that's what I always tell my mom, Mom, the generation now is different. Because there are times that she would say, Oh, you're not raising your children very well. Oh, but I have to make adjustments now. The way they raised me before is no longer applicable. Yes,
No.
because as what you've mentioned, the self-esteem, their self-worth would be impacted. It's
Yes.
not about being authoritarian. Okay, do this, do this, do this.
Yeah, because
It's
I
a
said so, because I'm your mother. Like
yes,
that doesn't fly anymore. That's
exactly.
downright abusive, in today's standards. And I am wholeheartedly so happy that that's not the case. When I watch my son and my daughter-in-law raising the grandkids and how they are and how they treat them and allow them their processes and their feelings, all of their feelings, I love it and I am here for it all.
Ah, see. So it's just nice to hear this from someone because most of the the people I've met, they cannot say no even to their family members.
Yeah,
I'm also
it's the
having
hardest
a hard
one.
time. Yes.
It really
It
is. It is the hardest one. It's still hard, but I know I have to do it. But I will say, when you can start saying no and know that you're going to get judgment, know that whether they say it, because, my family is not afraid to tell me how they feel, just like I'm not
Yeah.
afraid to tell them how I feel. But even with the judgments, if you can do that with your family and follow through and do what feels good in your soul, like if I want to sit home in my pajamas on Christmas Day because I don't want to go to a family gathering where they're going to be, it's going to be drama all day, then I can live with that. Like I'm okay with that. I'll suffer the little guilt here and there or what have you, because all of these things are little steps that are walking me to the next place. And I have never, not once, not ever, currently to this second, ever regretted choosing myself when my soul felt right about it. Not once have I regretted
Exactly.
that.
Absolutely.
And I've
But
regretted a lot of things in my life. I've regretted people pleasing. I've regretted saying yes when I meant no. I've regretted every one of those things. But choosing myself, even if I feel guilty, and I've never regretted that. And I don't think I ever will.
yes. So how is it now with your family? Have they accepted that fact now that,
I
oh,
mean,
my,
they pretty much know I'm going to go my own way and do my own thing.
okay.
And that doesn't sit well with some, but family is family, right? Everybody, like I said, nobody comes from functional. Nobody, I don't care where you are on this planet, nobody comes from functional.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but we still have love. Like no
Yes.
matter what, right? We all have our judgments, we all have our whatever, what we think is best for them, and I do the same thing. I think that certain members of my family should be doing other things with their life, but you know what, they have a right to choose and do what they want with their life, just like I have a right to choose and do what I want with mine. And so I can't say that I'm going to do what I want and extend you a different
Mm-hmm.
courtesy, like that's
Yeah.
hypocritical on my part. So we do love each other, but like I said, we're one big fat dysfunctional family. And I really hope that I think the toughest part of the whole thing is when I wasn't going to events and my son was. I thought I was making a not so good example, but I know that it is the right example, even though I don't know if he quite understands it yet, but I'll never forget. I saw a meme someplace, I don't know, Instagram or Facebook or something, and it said, you know, um, now I know why no one wanted to go to whatever's dinner because of uncle somebody or whatever. And I was like, yes. And that hit really hard because it, you know, some families have like dirty little secrets, so they just don't talk about it. Our family like
Mm-hmm.
talks and judges, and we all judge each other, and that's what we do. And it's
I
a lot
agree.
of it's out loud, and a lot of it's not out loud. So I constantly feel judged, even from my son. Sometimes I feel judged. So I always wondered like what he said, but I've never asked him like, "How did you feel about me not going to holidays and things like that?" And I probably didn't want to know the answer, but now that we're reflecting about it, I'm going to ask him. I'm going to be like, how
Yeah.
did that make you feel? And I'm going to wonder how did he feel about it then? And how does he feel about it now? And is that any different? Or maybe
Mm-hmm.
he's resentful at me because I didn't go, and maybe he still is, and
Uh-huh.
maybe he'll always be, but he gets to feel however he wants to feel about it. But I'm guessing I probably didn't ask because I didn't want to hear the answer at the time.
But it would be good to ask him. At least it's a
Absolutely.
very good feedback also.
Yes,
Uh-huh.
I think it's great to check in with your children to ask how you're doing. Like, how am I doing as a mom?
Mm-hmm.
And, maybe sometimes we don't want to hear the answers. And I have had hard conversations with my son, about, uh, you know, the way he was raised and the way I was raised, and and how it was so different and things like that, and what his expectations of me are, because when there's unsaid things and you feel judgments and you feel whatever, you have to have those conversations and go to those difficult spots, because sometimes they're making up things that maybe aren't even true, but until you have a conversation about it, you can never know,
Mm-hmm.
and they're just going to
Yes.
keep thinking these things, because I've
Yes.
had plenty of conversations with my sister about something that was never true, but she thought and judged me for it for so long that even after we had the difficult conversation, she still thinks it's true, even if it's not. That's why it's so important to have open communication. And that's tough sometimes because you have to have two willing people who actually value the relationship to want to have that conversation.
Exactly. And it's kind of draining, right? Draining.
It's very draining. It's very
Very
draining. But
draining.
I am a clear the air, work through it kind of girl. I don't like that, when you walk into a room and there's two people that have tension or anger or whatever they have, but you can feel it the minute you walk into a room. So imagine going to a holiday like that. Who wants to sit through that? Nobody wants to sit through that. I'm like, hey, what's going on? Let's talk about it. Let's clear the air. But nobody wants to talk about it. So why am I going to ever want to go there? Like, I'm never going to want to go there when like, let's talk about it. Because at least after you clear the air, then you can just be yourself and relax.
Mm-hmm. Yes, exactly. Now, you mentioned during the earlier that you you were abused physically. You've experienced this abusive relationship. Is it with your husband, ex-husband, or?
Okay, so I was never married, which was taboo already, and I got pregnant. So that was a whole nother
Oh.
thing with, that happened. But they embraced my son after he was born. Of course, it was the only boy, because I was the oldest and I had two younger sister. So it was the only boy in the family. So my grandfather finally was like, oh, as soon as he was born, he was like, oh, a son, my grandson, and my father, embraced my son right off the bat again because he didn't ever get the boy that he wanted.
Uh-huh.
um, but so abuse was all right. So in my family, there was a lot of yelling and screaming, which is abusive. There was a lot of gaslighting, which is abusive. Physical abuse looked like lining up and spanking us, right? Which would never fly in today's world, but it was very
Mm-hmm.
much accepted back then. You don't look at it as abuse when you're growing up. You think that that's normal because everybody else is they're
Mm-hmm.
getting hit with a belt. I'm getting hit with my father's bare hand, and they're like, "Oh, you got off easy." I'm like, "You don't know the size of my father's hand." you know and they would line us up to spank us and things like that. And I was sexually abused by my grandfather when I was young, so
Oh
that was
my.
tough. And and then of course that's not going to lead to healthy relationships later because I'm always going to be seeking that in men. And so to me, like you said earlier, abuse is love, right? So if that's how other people treated you, if they're yelling and screaming at you, well, it must be love because that's where I come from, And if they're hurting you emotionally or verbally and, not letting you have a voice, that must be love because again, I came from you should be seen and not heard kind of place. And like you said, it was like live up. Why aren't you living up to your potential? Maybe I was living up to my potential and your expectations are too high of me.
Mm-hmm. Yes,
That's
exactly.
abuse. Yeah. So
Mm-hmm.
there's all different ways that, people are abusive. Of course, I went to Catholic school. I was
Mm-hmm.
verbally, physically, mentally, and emotionally abused in Catholic school. And our parents paid tuition money for that. And you know what? That was accepted back then. They would have had, family services all over it today, but back then it was accepted. And we were
Yes.
shamed. We were shamed a lot in the Catholic school. If you got in trouble, they would pull you up in the middle of the whole school, grades 1 through 8,
Oh
and they had a
my.
paddle and a board of education, and they would pull you up to the microphone and with the paddle in front of the whole school at lunch, and they would hit you with the paddle and pull
Oh
your hair.
my. Oh my. Oh my. That's really abuse. Oh my. So,
Yeah.
so what, because of that, what have you done? What was that situation wherein you told yourself enough is enough? What?
Okay, so well, obviously the day I chose to get sober was probably a turning point. But I think my son was 7 going on 8 when I got sober. But I will say the turning point with, having my son was I got hit, but I'm never going to hit him. But that doesn't mean I didn't yell at him. That doesn't mean that I had my own, because you absorb your parents' unhealed stuff, right? And like we
Mhm.
talked about earlier, we're not talking about just their unhealed stuff. We're talking thousands of years passed down in the DNA. That's a lot to carry on somebody, and it's a lot to absorb as a child. So you have to dissect all of that. And that took a lot of time. But I did make a decision that I would never hit my child, and I never did. And of course, he was never put in positions where he was abused in the ways that I was abused. But I abused him in other ways, where I yelled a lot because that's where I came from, and yelling was normal.
Mhm. Mhm.
And and I'm the one who has to live with that and my decisions back then. But the turning point would probably be that kind of thing. Like, I'm not going to be like my parents there. And then when I got sober, because you have to be conscious to heal something. And
Uh-huh.
so those were turning points, decisions I made. And then when I was around 4 or 5 years sober, when emotionally all my stuff, all the reasons that I medicated with drugs and alcohol for so long, all of that stuff I was running from my past, that all of that abuse I talked about now needed to be healed, and life was telling me I needed to heal it, and now I can't medicate it away. So that landed me in a therapist chair. So that was another
Mhm.
defining. I've had many defining moments, and then even
Mhm.
even after that, where you have to kind of gain some faith, and maybe you lose some faith, and you gain some faith and you lose some
Mhm.
faith. But every single step has brought me right to this place here, where, I didn't have a sense of self. I was a doormat, people pleaser, which you can't even imagine. You don't even know me. And I don't even think you could imagine that I was that person, but I was, because I don't keep my mouth shut now. I don't, where other people don't have a voice, I will be their voice until they can have a voice. I will help to teach them to have a voice.
Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful.
That
So,
kind of thing. So
so, so how do you remain in power and continue what you do?
okay, so now I really listen to my soul. I feel the callings of that. When I'm
Mhm.
meditating or I'm out in nature or whatever that is for you, where you can get quiet and listen to the still voice inside of you, or your intuition, or whatever you call it. I listen to that today. I listen to that in my life, whether to be in connection with people in front of me based on that. I listen to that and I trust that. I get called to like sacred sites on the planet, whether it's mountains or pyramids or caves or wherever I feel called spiritually. I go to those places and I feel like that I receive from the land and I give back to the land, and then I bring it back home. And I, when I'm helping clients and, just people in life, being of service in life, whether it's volunteering or, whatever, like I said, clients, I try to be a walking, breathing example. Like I said earlier, if I tell you I'm going to do something, I'm going to do it. I'm a follow through kind of girl. I'm a clear the air kind of girl. And I constantly want to be learning, growing, and evolving. I made a decision a long time ago that I want to be the best Jacquie that I can be. And I want to leave this planet with zero regrets, that I did everything that I wanted to do and that I came here to do. And I want to be of service. And if you asked me 27 years ago when I got sober, if I wanted to be of service to anyone or the planet or volunteer, I would have been like, no, that's not happening, because at that time I was selfish and I didn't realize it, but I was just hurt, and I needed guidance and I needed help. And now I can be that light and help other people to do that.
I love that. Spreading light. Now becoming a light warrior, right? And let
Yes,
it spread
exactly.
and So with all the now you have reached, should I call it success that you have achieved, which is your dream? That is your
Yes.
purpose now, living your purpose. What is now your next goal for the next 12 months?
Okay, so for the next 12 months, I have several goals, right? So I've been working with people and speaking on stages for years and all of those things, right? And, and I help clients, personally as well. And I have coaching and teaching, and I do run groups and things like that. And I've always done that stuff like behind the scenes or on stages. I have no stage fright, no problem. This camera, that little dot up there, I'm trying to learn how to make friends with that camera. That's why I'm doing more podcasts and more speaking on camera, because it makes me uncomfortable, but yet I'm feeling called spiritually or my inner knowing, whatever, to do it. So clearly, whatever it is that I have to say or my little life needs to affect people on a different level now. So I'm feeling called to do more camera work, even though if you look at any of my social medias, I barely post anything. I'm very private when it comes to that. So the last thing I want to do is be on a camera. But I need to do that. So showing up and doing podcasts like this and doing YouTube videos and things like that, and I'm revamping a different website. I want to go in a different direction, in a more speaker forward direction than I was more in the healing coaching. So I'm moving in that, and it terrifies me, and I'm being called to it. And I thought maybe I could just like ignore the call for a couple years, but it just got louder and louder. So that's where I'm going. And it's kind of like, so yes, I do want to be of service, and I do want to be light, and I do want to follow the inner knowings, even if it scares the life out of me. So that's what I'm doing, even though part of me doesn't ever want to do it, because I love my life the way it is, and it's fine, and I can be behind the scenes, and I can just coach you to go do all of those things, and I don't have to do them.
But I don't.
But this is where you have to walk your walk. So now I'm literally
Yes.
walking my walk in front of all your viewers and ratting myself out.
Actually, I don't see you afraid speaking up in
Well,
front
that's
of the
because
camera.
you're not seeing me on the inside. Because here's the thing, I love to connect with people, right? I love to connect with people. Now, normally when I'm on a Zoom call, when there's no recording or it has nothing to do with me being interviewed or anything, I would just talk to your little box, your little Hollywood Squares box, right? And I would never look at the camera. But I've been told when you do that, the audience can't connect with you. So I have to look at this little green dot that's in front of me the whole time, even though I want to look down at your face and connect with your eyes, because that's where I feel comfortable. So this whole interview, I've been looking at this green dot instead of your beautiful face, because I'm trying to grow and evolve and live more of my purpose, but in a way that's helping to grow me as well.
Because the next question I was about to ask, what would be your major roadblock in achieving your goal? Having more podcasts.
Resistance. Yes,
Uh,
resistance. Resistance
oh.
is the biggest roadblock I have. And, I've had to work with other coaches, because just because you're a coach doesn't mean you know everything. Like I'm sharing my fear and my terror of being on camera with you right now. So I
Mhm.
don't have a problem sharing about my blind spots. I don't have a problem sharing about my fears, because we all have them, everybody's,
Exactly.
and whether it's real or imagined, it's still in my head and my anxieties. But I work with coaches too, and I try and stay accountable and move, a couple steps or even one step forward every day towards where you want to go, even if it's not where you think you want to go, like this camera thing, but where you're feeling called to go, and your soul is like, yes, 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 just do it. It's going to get easier. It's going to get easier. We promise it's not for nothing.
That's how you face your fear. Face it
Yes.
head on. Actually, I never imagined myself to be doing what I'm doing. I never imagined myself to be a writer,
Me
an author,
either.
or an international speaker, or having a podcast, and now coaching people. But I think, as what you have mentioned, also the inner self, the
Yes.
intuition, our connection with God. I think that
Yes.
was the main reason why I chose this path. It is because we want to help others have a
Right.
voice and then
Yes.
live the life they love as well.
Yes.
And by
Absolutely.
sharing our stories. And because a lot of people would resonate to the problems we have gone through. And
Yes.
it's just a matter of waking up, making the decision, staying committed, and taking action, right?
Yep.
And I like that you have accepted my invitation. So to be the guest here.
Well,
And I
that's the
hope,
other thing too. You have to say yes sometimes, even though you want to say no, sometimes you have to say yes to life. Do I say
ex-
yes to everything in life? No, but
no,
I'm saying yes to the things that I know are moving my soul forward, even if my head isn't catching up yet.
Because you have a purpose, you have a
I do.
role here on
Yes,
this earth, right? And this is, even though they are baby steps, but
they
it's
are.
going towards your destination, and that's your dream, and that's your purpose. Lovely.
Absolutely.
Wonderful, wonderful. So eh, um, what simple advice would you like to share with our listeners?
I would say, you don't, everything back in the day would be, I'll do it tomorrow, I'll do it next week. You know, we only have right now, right? We only have today. Today, tomorrow is not promised, and especially the older I get, the more that is exactly true. Life is very short, even though it seems long. So if you have dreams, just do one thing to move towards the dream, whatever it is, whatever that is for you. Take that one step, make that one phone call, do the thing that scares you, that your soul is calling you to do. The thing that you love is usually a good indicator of whatever that is, even if you lost touch, like somebody like me, where you didn't even know where to start. When you finally woke up from that dream of people pleasing and all of that and realized that you don't even have your own identity and you don't even know who you are, start there. Start remembering what you used to love as a kid. I used to love going in the woods and connecting with nature and horses and swimming and some people art. For me it was photography. Whatever that is, if you are just starting to find out who you are again because you just realize that you don't know who you are, start with what you loved as a kid and then work your way forward, because whatever you love is usually what's guiding you to where you're supposed to go.
Amazing, amazing. That's awesome. And I agree with you. Know what you're passionate about and the skills that you are good at, then pursue. That's
Yep,
the
just
gift.
develop it. That's it. Just
Yeah,
develop it one thing at a time and just move
exactly.
forward. When I first started speaking, to get up on a podium, I was terrified and my voice
Mm-hmm.
would shake and crack and I would have to get
Uh-huh.
up there and my one of my first coaches was like, "You know what? Just rat yourself out. Just tell them like, "Hey, I'm really nervous and whatever." And as soon as I would say that, it would go away.
Yeah.
But then in other settings for work and things like that, when you're speaking, you can't have the luxury of saying, "Oh, I'm scared," and let it go, even though you know it will. You have to kind of say that on the inside while you're still looking like you're confident and you know what you're talking about. And even though you do
Ah,
know what you're talking about, you're like shaking and quaking on the inside. You just have to be afraid and do it anyway, especially when you know it's moving you in the right direction.
yes, absolutely. Correct. I agree with you. And before I speak in public, I usually have this breathing exercise that I usually
Yeah.
do to calm me
Relax.
down. And then I would
Whatever
massage
works,
my
right?
palm.
Right.
Yes.
All the
Uh-huh.
little regulations, I say all my
Yes.
prayers, whatever that is. I
Yes.
hold like now I hold my crystals in my hand, whatever,
Oh,
whatever it is for you, whatever it is. Like this is my anxiety stone, I guess, for the hour, because I just picked it up while we started recording and it's just, letting me pet it while we're talking.
uh-huh. And now look what it's just like having a cup of coffee, chatting at Starbucks.
Absolutely. Yeah, like I love the conversations. It's looking at the green dot and not looking at you that I have to get over in my brain. That's all. My brain
But
doesn't know what to
sorry,
do with that yet.
me, I always look at you. I look at my sorry. I
There
hope
you go.
you don't get what do you call that? Conscious.
Oh, no, no, no.
Okay. Thank you so much, Jackie. It was a
Thank you.
wonderful
Thank you. This was
episode with
great.
you. It was a nice chat with you. And again, it's also an honor to have you, Jackie. Uh,
It's been an honor to be here. Pleasure. My pleasure. You have a great day.
Okay, you too. Thank you. And to all our listeners, I'm sure you were able to get a lot of insights from Jackie and from the discussion. And as what we have mentioned, set a dream, take action towards your dream, even though they are baby steps. you
Baby
will
steps.
still
Every
be
baby
there.
step will get you where you're going.
Exactly. Okay, thank you. And till next episode, goodbye.